He told me I lacked a scalable mindset. The words hung in the air of the tiny sterile office he'd set up in the back of my coffee shop, smelling of fresh paint and ambition that wasn't his own. He was the new owner, a man named Marcus Thorne, who wore suits that cost more than my rent and had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in the 3 weeks since he'd bought the Daily Grind, and saw nothing more than a cog, a girl who made lattes. My name is Leah, and for 6 years, I wasn't just the head barista at the Daily Grind. I was its heart. I knew the name of every regular, the way they took their coffee, the story behind the new lines on their faces. I developed the training protocols. I managed the inventory, and I curated the music that filled the space with its warm, eclectic vibe. But most importantly, I created the Aurora blend, the shop's legendary, wildly profitable secret blend, the one that kept our 3 biggest corporate clients ordering hundreds of bags a month. He thought it was a company recipe, a line item on a spreadsheet he'd acquired. He was wrong. So when he sat me down on that flimsy chair and told me my 6 years of devotion, my 18-hour days, my soul poured into every cup, was being terminated in favor of a push-button espresso machine and prepackaged pastries. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. A quiet heat flushed up my neck, but my face remained a mask of calm professionalism. I let him finish his soulless speech about synergy and efficiency and building a brand that could be franchised from coast to coast. A brand that had no room for someone who, in his words, was stuck in the past. You know, it's a strange feeling to have your life's work erased in a single condescending sentence. If you've ever poured your heart into a project, a job, a relationship, only to have someone dismiss it like it was nothing, let me know in the comments. It really does help to know you're not just screaming into the void. He slid a thin folder across the table. A severance package that was an insult wrapped in legal jargon. He expected a reaction. Tears, maybe. A flash of anger. He got none of it. I just nodded slowly, my gaze steady on his. I said, I understand. I picked up the folder and stood. The silence in the room stretched, and for the first time he looked a little uncomfortable. He was a man who understood loud conflict, not quiet compliance. Quiet unnerved him. He didn't know that quiet is where the real work gets done. He thought he was cutting dead weight. He had no idea he was cutting the anchor line and setting me free. He thought he was just firing a barista. He didn't know he was declaring war on the one person who held the actual keys to his kingdom. And I was leaving. I was taking the blend, the clients, and his entire future with me. The walk out of the shop was the longest of my life. The familiar scent of roasted beans and steamed milk, a smell that had been my comfort and my pride for over 2,000 days, now felt like a ghost clinging to my clothes. Each step was a severing. I passed the worn wooden counter I'd sanded and restained myself one long weekend. I saw the row of copper mugs I'd sourced from a local artisan. I heard the low hum of the grinder, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. It was all mine, yet none of it was. Marcus was buying the shell, the name on the door. He didn't understand that the soul of the place was walking out with me. My hands were steady on the steering wheel of my old, reliable car, but a tremor was starting deep in my bones. I drove through the city streets on autopilot, the world outside the windows a blurry watercolor of traffic lights and indifferent faces. I didn't go home. Not yet. Home was a small apartment that always smelled faintly of coffee, a sanctuary that would now feel like a museum of a life that had just been canceled. Instead, I drove to a lookout point on the edge of the city, a place I used to go when I needed to think. I switched off the engine. The silence was absolute, and in that silence, the dam broke. It wasn't a loud, theatrical sob. It was a silent, gut-wrenching collapse. My carefully constructed composure crumbled, and the full weight of the betrayal pressed down on me, forcing the air from my lungs. 6 years. I'd given this place my 20s. I'd missed weddings, birthdays, holidays, all in service of a dream I thought I was a part of. I remembered the original owner, Arthur, a kind, round man with flour permanently dusted on his forearms and a genuine passion for his craft. He'd owned the Daily Grind for 40 years before me. It was a neighborhood institution, a simple place with good coffee and homemade scones. He saw something in me when I was just a kid looking for a part-time job. He saw the focus, the curiosity. He taught me how to taste coffee, not just drink it. He'd say, Leah, coffee has a story. You just have to be quiet enough to listen to it. He gave me a playground. He let me order small batches of exotic beans. He let me tinker with the roaster. He trusted me, and out of that trust, the Aurora blend was born. It wasn't a sudden discovery. It was a slow, painstaking process of creation, a journey that took the better part of a year. I think back on it now, and I realize I wasn't just making a coffee blend. I was building my future, one bean at a time. It started with a memory, a taste from a coffee I'd had once at a specialty expo. It had notes of jasmine and citrus, a clean, bright flavor that haunted me. I became obsessed with recreating it, but making it my own. I started researching. My nights were filled with books on soil acidity, altitude, and processing methods. I learned about the revered geisha varietal, a bean so delicate and aromatic it was known as the champagne of coffee, but it was expensive, prohibitively so. I couldn't just order a 100-pound sack of it for the shop. Arthur, bless his heart, saw the fire in my eyes. He gave me a small budget, what he called his mad science fund. He told me if you make something magical, it'll pay for itself 10 times over. He believed in me. So I started small. I found a family-owned farm in the Chiriquí province of Panama, a tiny micro-lot run by a man named Esteban, who only communicated via sporadic emails. He didn't have a flashy website or a marketing team. He had generations of knowledge and a small plot of land that produced the most extraordinary geisha beans I had ever tasted. I convinced him to sell me a 5-pound bag. It felt like I was buying gold. When it arrived, the green, unroasted beans smelled of honeysuckle and green tea. It was a start. But the geisha was only one part of the puzzle. It was too delicate on its own, almost ethereal. It needed a foundation, a body. I experimented for months. I tried blending it with Colombian beans for a chocolatey base, but it bulldozed the subtle floral notes. I tried Ethiopian beans, but the berry flavors clashed. I was close to giving up when I stumbled upon an article about aged Sumatran coffee, beans that were stored for years in special warehouses, developing a deep, earthy, almost spicy complexity. It was a risk. Aged coffee could easily taste musty or funky, but I found a supplier who specialized in it, and ordered another small, precious bag. The day I first blended them, my hands were shaking. I roasted the 2 beans separately, each to a precise, different temperature curve I'd mapped out on a graph. The geisha roast was short and fast, to preserve its bright acidity. The Sumatran was a slow, patient roast, to develop its syrupy body. Then the blend. 70% Panamanian geisha, 30% aged Sumatran. I ground the beans, and the aroma filled my small back room. It was unlike anything I had ever smelled. It was floral and bright, but also deep and resonant, with a hint of something like warm spice and dark chocolate. I brewed the first cup using a pour-over, the method that I felt gave me the most control. I watched the water bloom over the grounds, the rich reddish-brown crema rising to the surface. It shimmered under the single bulb of my work lamp, reflecting the light in a way that reminded me of the northern lights. That's where the name came from. Aurora blend. I took the first sip, and it was magic. It was everything I had imagined and more. The bright citrusy notes of the geisha hit first, followed by a smooth, full body and a clean finish that left a lingering sweetness on the palate. I ran out and gave a cup to Arthur. He took a long, slow sip, his eyes closed. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he opened his eyes, looked at me and said, "Leah, my girl, you did it. That's not just coffee, that's a masterpiece." We started serving it as a special off-menu item for our most discerning regulars. The reaction was immediate. People were captivated. They'd ask what was in it, and I'd just smile and say, "It's a secret." The mystery was part of the appeal. It created a community of insiders, people who knew to ask for the good stuff. The business started to change. Word of mouth spread through the city. We were no longer just a neighborhood coffee shop. We were a destination. That's when Mr. Sterling walked in. He was the CEO of Sterling Wealth Management, a firm whose gleaming office tower was just a few blocks away. He was a man who radiated an aura of quiet, immense power. He'd read an article about us in a local food blog. He ordered a regular drip coffee. I saw him take a sip and his face was impassive. I took a risk. I walked over to his table. I said, "Excuse me, sir. I can tell you're a man who appreciates the finer things. May I offer you something special, on the house?" He was intrigued. I went back and brewed him a cup of the Aurora blend. I brought it to him and watched. He swirled it, inhaled the aroma, and took a small, deliberate sip. His eyebrows shot up. It was the first crack in his polished facade I'd seen. He looked at me, then at the cup, then back at me. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. I told him it was my personal creation, the Aurora blend. He finished the cup, stood up, and handed me his business card. He said, "I want this coffee in my office, exclusively. I don't care what it costs." That was the beginning. He became our first corporate client. Soon his associates at other firms were asking where he got his coffee. The call came from Vivid, a trendy and influential design agency. Then from Cypher, a fast-growing software company run by a CEO who was a notorious coffee snob. They didn't just want coffee, they wanted the Aurora blend, and they wanted to deal with me, personally. I managed those accounts. I curated their orders. I held tasting sessions for their new employees. I built relationships based on trust and a shared passion for quality. These 3 accounts became the financial backbone of the daily grind. They represented nearly 60% of our net profit. But even then, a small voice of unease was whispering in my mind. Arthur's health had started to decline. He was getting older, and the long hours were taking their toll. We talked about the future. He wanted to retire, to spend time with his grandkids. He told me he was thinking of selling. One evening, after we'd closed up, he sat me down with a cup of the Aurora. He looked at me with his kind, tired eyes. "Leah, this blend, it's not the shop's, it's yours. It came from your head and your heart. When I sell this place, you need to protect it. You need to make sure no one can take it from you." The idea was terrifying. Lawyers, paperwork, business licenses. I was a barista, an artist. But Arthur was insistent. He said, "The world is full of people who will take credit for your art if you let them. Don't let them." That conversation was the spark. I spent the next 2 months secretly working with a law student friend. I researched LLCs, trademarks, and trade secret law. It felt like learning a foreign language. I took the money I had painstakingly saved and used it to formally incorporate. I called it Aura Bean Artisans, LLC. The name was a nod to the original blend, but it was also a statement. I was an artisan. My work had value. I registered the name Aurora Blend as a trademark owned by my LLC. The recipe itself, the specific percentages, the roasting profiles, the exclusive sourcing agreement I'd solidified with Esteban in Panama, that was my protected trade secret. The day the official documents arrived in the mail, I felt a profound sense of relief. It was my shield, a secret weapon held in reserve. I never told Arthur I did it. I didn't want him to worry. I just continued my work, managing the accounts, perfecting the craft. Our arrangement was an unspoken understanding. I was the creator, and the daily grind was the venue. My employment was the implicit license. No one ever thought to write it down. It was a relationship built on trust, not contracts. A fatal flaw in a world run by men like Marcus Thorne. When Arthur finally sold the shop, it was a sad, quiet affair. He introduced me to Marcus, assuring me that he was a smart businessman who would respect the shop's legacy. I knew from the moment I shook Marcus's hand that Arthur was wrong. Marcus didn't see a legacy, he saw an under-monetized asset. He walked through the shop with the eyes of a predator, his gaze lingering on the worn-in charm not with affection, but with a cold calculus of what he could rip out and replace. He used words like streamline and optimize. He saw my personal relationships with the corporate clients, not as a strength but as an inefficiency, a bottleneck. He wanted a system that didn't rely on a single person. He wanted something scalable. He wanted something that didn't need me. For the 3 weeks between the sale and my firing, I existed in a state of suspended dread. I saw the signs. He brought in consultants who timed my latte art with a stopwatch. He replaced our locally sourced milk with a generic long shelf-life brand. He told me to stop wasting time talking to customers. Every change was a small stab, a chipping away at the soul of the place. I held on though. A part of me, a foolish, loyal part, hoped he would see the value, that he would look at the profit and loss statements, see the massive revenue from the corporate accounts, and understand that I was the engine driving it. It's debatable logic, I know. Why did I stay? Why did I wait for him to fire me? I think it was loyalty, not to him, but to the memory of Arthur, to the regulars, to the very walls of the shop. I couldn't just abandon it. I had to be pushed out. That's a weakness, maybe. Or maybe it was a subconscious need to have the line drawn so clearly in the sand that I would have no choice but to fight back. Sitting there in my car, the city lights beginning to glitter in the twilight, these memories swirled around me, not as a comfort, but as fuel. The shock was burning off, replaced by something cold and hard, a diamond of resolve forming in the pressure chamber of my despair. He hadn't just fired me. He had insulted my craft, my intelligence, and the memory of the man who had given me my start. He was planning to mass-produce a cheap imitation of my art, and call it by the name I had given it. He was a thief, preparing to rob a house he didn't know was empty. My phone buzzed, startling me from my reverie. It was a text from Maya. She was my second in command, a young, passionate barista I had trained myself. She had the same fire I once had. The text was short, a frantic burst of words. "Leah, he's in the back with some cheap commodity beans. He's trying to figure out the Aurora. He asked me what was in it. I played dumb. It smells like burnt plastic. The regulars are already complaining. What do I do?" That was it. That was the catalyst. The last flicker of grief was extinguished, replaced by a glacial calm. He wasn't just erasing me, he was defiling my creation. My hand reached for the glove compartment. I pulled out a simple manila folder. Inside were the articles of Organization for Aura Bean Artisans, LLC. I looked at my name on the paper, listed as the sole member and owner. Leah, founder. It was right there, in black and white. My shield, my weapon. I started the car. The engine purred to life, a steady, reliable sound. I knew where I was going now. I was going home. The war room was waiting. My apartment, which had seemed like a potential tomb of memories just an hour before, now felt like a command center. The faint smell of coffee was no longer a haunting. It was the smell of industry, of potential. I walked straight past the living room with its comfortable couch and stacks of books and went into my small second bedroom. This was my office, my sanctuary, my laboratory. One wall was covered in corkboard, pinned with tasting notes, roasting charts, and maps of coffee-growing regions. My computer sat on a simple desk, but it wasn't just one computer. It was two. One was the standard laptop I used for everyday tasks. The other was a matte black, encrypted machine that held the entire blueprint of my professional life. It held the LLC documents, the trademark filings, the detailed recipe for the Aurora blend, my correspondence with Esteban in Panama, and the meticulously organized files for my 3 corporate clients. This was the foresight that Arthur had urged me to have. This was the parachute I had been quietly weaving for the past year, hoping I would never have to use it. I powered on the black laptop. Its screen glowed to life, a quiet promise of the power it contained. My plan wasn't born of frantic revenge. It was the logical execution of a contingency that had been in place all along. It was a structure I had built on a foundation of professional respect, a structure Marcus had just tried to demolish without ever checking the blueprints. He didn't know the foundation had my name carved into the frame. My first call was not to a client, but to my lawyer. Well, lawyer was a generous term. Sarah was my best friend from college who had just passed the bar 6 months ago. She was sharp, hungry, and fiercely loyal. I'd paid for her incorporation services with free coffee for a year. I got her on the phone and explained the situation in calm, precise terms. Fired, new owner, he thinks he owns the blend. I could hear her furiously typing in the background. She was silent for a moment and then a low whistle. Leah, she said, her voice a mix of awe and predatory glee. This is better than ironclad. This is a fortress. He has nothing. Zero. The trademark for Aurora Blend is registered to your LLC. The recipe is your personal intellectual property, a protected trade secret. The supply chain for the key ingredient is exclusively yours. His ownership of the daily grind gives him the right to sell coffee, but it doesn't give him the right to sell your coffee without your permission. And since your employment was the basis of that permission, the moment he fired you, he terminated his own license to use the blend. The words washed over me, a confirmation of what I already knew, but hearing it from a legal professional solidified my resolve. It wasn't a messy fight. It was a simple statement of fact. Sarah continued, her voice gaining speed. He's probably going to try and replicate it. Let him. The recipe is a trade secret. If he tries to sell a cheap knockoff under the Aurora name, that's trademark infringement. We can send a cease and desist so fast it'll make his head spin. We have him, Leah. We have him cold. We talked for another 20 minutes, plotting out the exact legal sequence. The beauty of it was in its simplicity. I didn't need to sue him. I didn't need to engage in a messy public battle. All I had to do was reclaim what was already mine. When I hung up, I felt a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. My next step was to secure the supply chain. I pulled up my correspondence with Esteban, the farmer in Panama. Our relationship was more than just transactional. Over the past few years, we had built a real partnership. I paid him significantly above market rate for his beans because I respected his craft. I had helped him set up a better website and translated his tasting notes into English for international buyers. In return, he gave me exclusive access to his award-winning geisha microlot. I sent him a short, carefully worded email. Dear Esteban, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to inform you that I am no longer with the Daily Grind. I have started my own venture, Aura Bean Artisans, where I will continue to feature your incredible coffee. I am preparing a larger than usual order and will be wiring the funds in advance. Please be advised that any future inquiries for this specific microlot from the Daily Grind or its new owner should be directed to me. Thank you for your continued partnership. Best, Leah. It was a quiet coup, executed with a handful of sentences. I was cutting off his access at the source. He could search the world over, but he would never find the exact beans that gave the Aurora its soul. He didn't even know what country to look in. Next, I had to activate my network. My primary asset was Maya. She was my insider, my loyal ally. I texted her and asked her to meet me at a small neutral ground diner halfway between our apartments. When she slid into the booth, her face was a mixture of anxiety and anger. "He's a monster, Leah," she said, her voice a low hiss. "He treats the customers like they're an inconvenience. He timed me on a pour-over and told me I was taking 12 seconds too long. He wants to replace the ceramic cups with paper ones to improve workflow. He's destroying everything." I listened patiently, letting her vent. Her anger was a reflection of my own. She was worried about her job, but she was more worried about the death of a place she had come to love. I looked her in the eye. "Maya, I'm starting my own company. It's just me, for now. I'm taking the Aurora blend and the corporate clients with me. His business is going to take a massive, massive hit. I don't know what will happen to the shop, but I want to offer you a job. It won't be much at first. It'll be hard work, but it will be ours. We'll build it right." Her eyes widened. The fear on her face was replaced by a dawning excitement. "Are you serious?" she whispered. I nodded. Her decision was instantaneous. "I'm in," she said, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "I'm in. What do you need me to do?" I told her, "For now, just be my eyes and ears. I need to know what's happening on the inside. I need to understand the chaos when the first domino falls. Don't put yourself at risk, but keep me informed." She agreed, her role as my operative giving her a new sense of purpose. We were a team. This was no longer just my fight. Her loyalty was a subplot to the main drama, a story of a young professional choosing integrity over a tainted paycheck. It was a choice that would define her own career path. My final preparation was the most critical. It was time to approach the clients. This was the true leverage. It wasn't the LLC, it wasn't the trademark, it wasn't even the secret recipe. My real unassailable asset was the trust I had built with Mr. Sterling, with the team at Vivid, and with the CEO of Cypher. They weren't buying coffee from the daily grind. They were buying coffee from Leah. I spent the next 2 days in a state of intense, focused creation. I didn't just write an email, I built a presentation. A small, elegant digital package. It began with a simple, clean title page, Aura Bean Artisans, a new beginning for a timeless blend. The next page was a short, personal letter. It didn't mention Marcus. It didn't mention being fired. It simply stated that I had transitioned to my own company to focus exclusively on high-end coffee curation and sourcing. It was a narrative of elevation, not of revenge. The core of the presentation was a reaffirmation of value. I included the story of the Aurora blend, the details about the Panamanian farm, the philosophy of my craft. It was a reminder of what they had bought into in the first place. The final page was the offer. It wasn't just a continuation of their old order, it was an expansion. I offered them not just the beans, but a full-service coffee program, on-site training for their staff, curated selections of other rare coffees I could source, and personal consultations. I was upselling them on myself. I was demonstrating a scalable mindset, using Marcus's own words as the blueprint for my new business model. I designed 3 versions, each with a personalized introduction. For Mr. Sterling, I referenced a conversation we'd had about a rare Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee he was fond of. For Vivid, I focused on the creative story and branding. For Cypher, I included a detailed chemical analysis of the blend's caffeine-to-flavor compound ratio, appealing to the engineer and their CEO. It was a masterclass in targeted communication. I thought back on my relationships with each of them. Mr. Sterling wasn't just a client, he was a mentor of sorts. He saw the business acumen behind my passion. He'd once told me, "Leah, the most valuable asset in any business is a trusted relationship. Products can be copied, services can be replicated, but trust is unique." He was right. The team at Vivid loved the story. They were designers, storytellers. They didn't just buy the coffee, they bought into the narrative of a young woman creating something unique and special. They used our story on their own About Us page as an example of a supplier who shared their values. The CEO of Cypher, a man named Ben, was a purist. He treated coffee like code. He wanted precision, consistency, and a superior result. Our conversations were less about feelings and more about extraction times, water temperature, and grind consistency. He respected my technical expertise. I had built a different kind of fortress with each of them. One of mutual respect, one of shared values, and one of proven competence. Marcus Thorne thought he was taking over a simple supply contract. He had no idea he was attempting to breach 3 distinct, personalized, and heavily fortified relationships. On Friday afternoon, I sat at my desk, the 3 emails queued up and ready to go. My apartment was quiet. The sun was streaming through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. This was the moment. There was no going back. I took a deep, steadying breath. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself, a phrase that was becoming a mantra. It was about continuity. It was about protecting my art. It was about reclaiming my work. I clicked send on the first email to Mr. Sterling, then the second to Vivid, then the third to Cypher. 3 quiet clicks, the sound of a silent revolution. I closed the laptop. A strange sense of peace settled over me. The plan was in motion. The pieces were on the board. All I had to do now was wait for the king to realize he was already in checkmate. The weekend was the strangest I'd ever experienced. It was a void, a pocket of silence between the lightning and the thunder. I didn't check my email. I didn't pace around my apartment. I forced myself to disconnect. I went for a long hike. I read a novel. I cooked an elaborate meal for myself. I was acting as if I had all the confidence in the world, even as a small part of my brain was screaming in anxiety. This was a deliberate strategy. Panicking wouldn't change the outcome. My moves were made. The trap was set. Now I had to trust my work. I had to trust the relationships I had built. The quiet, I knew, was my greatest weapon. Marcus operated in a world of noise, loud pronouncements, aggressive negotiations, and panicked phone calls. My victory, if it came, would arrive in silence. Monday morning came. I woke up early, brewed myself a cup of a simple Kenyan coffee, and sat by the window. I still hadn't opened my laptop. The city was waking up, a low hum of traffic starting to build. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. Morning, he's here, in a surprisingly good mood, whistling. God, I hate his whistling. I texted back, stay calm, report only what you see. At 9:02 a.m., the next text came. Okay, the landline just rang. It was Mr. Sterling's assistant. She canceled their weekly standing order, permanently. The whistling has stopped. A small grim smile touched my lips. The first domino had fallen. I could picture the scene perfectly. Marcus, his smugness evaporating, staring at the phone in disbelief. He would assume it was a simple administrative issue, a temporary problem he could solve with a phone call. He didn't know it was a symptom of a much larger disease. At 9:30 a.m., Maya texted again. He's on the phone with the supplier, the big corporate one he set up last week. He's asking them for the Aurora blend. He's yelling now. He just shouted, "What do you mean you've never heard of it? It's our signature product." I had to put my phone down to keep from laughing out loud. I could feel his confusion, his dawning panic. He was punching at smoke. He was trying to navigate a map where the main continent, my knowledge, had been completely erased. He was lost, and he didn't even know it. I decided it was time to check my own email. I opened the encrypted laptop. My inbox was a beautiful sight. There were 3 new emails, one from each of my clients. Mr. Sterling's was concise and to the point. Leah, good to hear from you. Your timing is impeccable. The new management here is unimpressive. Let's talk. My assistant will schedule a call for this afternoon. The attached document is our new service agreement. My lawyer has already reviewed it. Let me know if the terms are acceptable. Welcome to the free market. I opened the attachment. It wasn't just a contract for coffee beans. It was a full-service consultancy agreement. With a retainer that was more than my old annual salary, he had not only accepted my offer, he had doubled down on it. He was investing in me, not just my product. The email from Vivid's director was warmer. Leah, we were so worried when we heard you were gone. So thrilled you've started your own thing. Of course we're coming with you. The story is everything, and you're the author. The team is already buzzing. Contract is signed. Let's do lunch next week to celebrate our treat. Cypher's CEO, Ben, had replied with a single sentence. The logic of this move is sound. Contract signed. Please send the first shipment ASAP, and an invoice for the new consultation services. It was a clean sweep, a total victory, achieved without a single angry word, without a single confrontation. It was a testament to the power of quiet competence. I sat there, reading and rereading the emails, letting the reality of it sink in. In the space of a single weekend, I had gone from being unemployed to being a business owner with 3 major clients and a guaranteed revenue stream that was frankly staggering. My phone buzzed again. It was a picture from Maya, a photo of Marcus, standing in the back room of the shop, surrounded by bags of his cheap generic coffee. He was holding a scoop of beans, staring at them with a look of utter helpless rage. The caption from Maya read, "He's now accusing the grinder of being broken." This was the contrast. This was the noise versus the silence. While he was descending into a spiral of impotent fury, blaming his tools for his own ignorance, I was quietly building my new empire. It was time for the next phase of my plan, the subtle public reveal. I wasn't going to take out an ad or issue a press release. That was Marcus's style, all bluster and no substance. My move had to be more elegant, more effective. I spent the rest of the morning on my website. It was a simple, minimalist design I had prepared weeks ago. A single beautiful hero image of the Aurora blend, its shimmering crema catching the light. Below it, a simple, powerful statement, Aura Bean Artisans, the exclusive home of the Aurora blend. And underneath that, I added a new section, proudly serving, and I placed the logos of Sterling Wealth Management, Vivid, and Cypher side by side. It was a quiet declaration of power. It didn't say I stole these clients. It said these leaders in their fields trust me. It was unimpeachable. I hit publish. The website went live. It felt like planting a flag on a newly discovered continent. The final touch, however, came from an unexpected source. Around noon, my phone lit up with a notification from LinkedIn. Mr. Sterling had posted an update. It was a picture of him, in his high-rise office, holding a cup of coffee. The caption read, "Enjoying the first cup from a truly exciting new venture. A big congratulations to my friend Leah on the launch of Aura Bean Artisans. A reminder that true talent and entrepreneurial spirit always find a way to thrive. If you value quality and integrity, you know who to call." He had tagged me and my new company page. It was a public anointment, a kingmaker's endorsement. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of likes. It was being shared by other CEOs, by venture capitalists, by the city's entire business ecosystem. My company, which had been nothing more than a legal entity 24 hours earlier, was now the most talked about new business in the city. I received a final text from Maya, around 2 p.m. He saw the LinkedIn post. One of the regulars showed it to him. He didn't yell, he just went very, very quiet. He walked into the back office and closed the door. I think he finally understands. He finally understood. He had been playing checkers, moving his little plastic pieces around the board, thinking he was winning. He never realized he was sitting at a chess table, and I had put him in checkmate 3 moves ago. The silent takeover was complete. The kingdom was mine. He was now just a trespasser in a castle that had already been conquered. The power shift was palpable. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a tangible reality, measured in signed contracts and new wire transfers hitting my business account. The money was one thing, a clear and satisfying metric of success. But the real shift was in the dynamics of respect. I was no longer an employee to be managed. I was a founder to be courted. The first tangible proof of this new reality came from the clients themselves. They weren't just re-upping their old orders, they were embracing the new, expanded services I had offered. Mr. Sterling's office scheduled a 2-hour coffee tasting and education session for his top partners, catered by me. Vivid asked me to design a custom Vivid blend for their client gift packages for the holidays. Cypher's CEO, Ben, wanted me to consult on the design of the new high-end coffee bar in their office expansion. They weren't just buying my blend, they were buying my brain. They were buying the very expertise Marcus had dismissed as a non-scalable hobby. It was the ultimate validation. Then came the move that solidified my new beginning. Maya called me on Wednesday, her voice strained. "Leah, I can't do it anymore. I have to quit. The atmosphere here is toxic. He's a ghost. He just walks around, staring at things. All the joy is gone. The regulars have stopped coming. It's just a soulless box now." She paused, and I could hear her take a deep breath. "Is your offer, is it still on the table?" My heart swelled. This was about more than just getting an employee. This was about rescuing someone I cared about. It was about building a team based on shared values, not just a shared payroll. "Of course, Maya," I said, my voice warm and certain. "The offer is absolutely on the table. In fact, I was hoping you'd call. When can you start?" She gave her 2 weeks' notice that afternoon. It was a formality. Marcus barely looked at her when she told him. He just nodded, his eyes vacant. Maya's departure was the final nail in the coffin for the old daily grind. She was the last remaining link to its authentic past. With her gone, it truly would become the soulless franchise Marcus had envisioned, only without the profitable secret blend to prop it up. The climax of the week, however, came on Friday afternoon. Exactly 1 week after I had sent my 3 quiet emails. My phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a gut feeling told me I should. I picked it up. Hello, Aura Bean Artisans. This is Leah. There was a pause on the other end, then a voice I recognized with a jolt. It was Marcus. His tone was completely different. The condescending swagger was gone, replaced by a thin, strained attempt at cordiality. Leah, it's Marcus Thorne. I know, I said, my voice perfectly calm. He cleared his throat. Look, I think there's been a major misunderstanding here. I waited, letting the silence do the work for me. He stumbled on, his words clumsy. That blend, the Aurora. I wasn't aware of the formal ownership structure. My due diligence team, they missed it. It's a clear oversight on our part. He was trying to frame it as a bureaucratic error, not a fundamental failure of his own judgment. I remained silent. So, he continued, his voice taking on a desperate, pleading edge. I want to make this right. I'm prepared to offer you your job back. Not as a barista, as a director of coffee innovation. A senior leadership position. We'll double your old salary. We'll give you a budget, creative control, whatever you want. We just need to get the corporate accounts back. We need the blend. And there it was, the desperate counteroffer. The pathetic attempt to buy back the power he had so arrogantly thrown away. It was the moment every wronged employee dreams of. The moment the person who fired you comes crawling back, begging you to save them from the consequences of their own stupidity. A wave of pure, ice-cold satisfaction washed over me. I could have gloated. I could have listed his every offense. I could have hung up on him. But that was his style. Noise. I chose silence. I let the pause stretch for 5 long seconds. I could hear his shallow breathing on the other end of the line. Then I spoke, my voice quiet, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. Marcus, I said, letting his name hang in the air. You told me I lacked a scalable mindset. I paused again, letting his own words sink in. It turns out, I continued, you were right. I was thinking too small. Thank you for the push. And with that, I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I just gently tapped the screen, cutting the connection, severing the last tie to my old life. It was a declaration of independence more powerful than any shouted retort. The power hadn't just shifted, it had been completely and irrevocably transferred. He had no more moves to make. The game was over. The weeks that followed were a blur of productive, joyful work. Maya and I found a small, sun-drenched commercial space in a burgeoning arts district. It had been an old print shop, and it had the high ceilings and concrete floors that were perfect for a roastery and tasting room. We spent our days painting walls, assembling equipment, and fulfilling the steady stream of orders that were now coming in, not just from my original 3 clients, but from new ones who had heard about us through the grapevine of the city's elite. Mr. Sterling's LinkedIn post had been more effective than any marketing campaign I could have ever afforded. I didn't seek out a final confrontation with Marcus. I didn't need one. His defeat was not my objective, it was simply a consequence of my success. But the universe, it seems, has a flair for dramatic irony. About a month after the call, I had a finalization meeting at Sterling Wealth Management. We were signing the physical copies of our now massive contract. Mr. Sterling was beaming, telling me his partners couldn't stop raving about the tasting session. He walked me out himself, through the opulent marble lobby of his building. And that's when I saw him, Marcus. He was standing near the security desk, looking lost and disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he was holding a cheap-looking corporate brochure. He was clearly there to try and beg for the account back in person, a sad pilgrim on a hopeless quest. Our eyes met across the lobby, a flicker of recognition, of shock, of pure, undiluted humiliation crossed his face. He looked like a ghost at the feast. I didn't smile, I didn't scowl, I didn't offer any sign of recognition beyond a brief, almost imperceptible nod. It was the kind of polite, distant acknowledgement you give a stranger. Then I turned and walked away, pushing through the heavy glass doors and out into the bright afternoon sun. No words were necessary. The tableau in that lobby said everything. Me, leaving as a valued partner, him waiting as a supplicant who would never get past the front desk. That was the real confrontation. The silent, public confirmation of our new realities. The final nail in his professional coffin came a few weeks later, via a text from Maya, who had heard it from a friend still in the industry. The parent company that had funded Marcus's grand vision for a soulless franchise empire had pulled the plug. The rapid, high-profile loss of the 3 major corporate accounts, which were the primary assets of the original business, was deemed a catastrophic failure of management. The daily grind, the original shop was being closed and its assets liquidated, sold for parts. Marcus Thorne was out. Not just from the shop, but from the investment group. His scalable dream had collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. I felt a quiet sense of vindication. It wasn't a gleeful, celebratory feeling. It was a calm, profound sense of order being restored. The system had corrected itself. A fatal error. Marcus had been identified and removed. It was never about revenge. It was about proving that quality, integrity, and real human relationships are the most valuable assets of all. They are the things that cannot be bought or franchised. They have to be earned. My new throne wasn't a corner office in a skyscraper. It was a simple wooden stool in the corner of my own roastery. Ora Bean Artisans was thriving. The room was filled with the rich, intoxicating smell of freshly roasted coffee. Maya, now my head of operations, was expertly packing a large shipment for a new client, a major tech firm that had aggressively pursued us after their CEO tasted our coffee at a Vivid agency party. The quiet hum of our new, state-of-the-art roaster was the only soundtrack. I was holding a warm ceramic cup, watching the steam rise from a perfectly brewed cup of the Aurora blend. The light streamed in through the large industrial windows, illuminating the space with a hopeful glow. This was my kingdom, not built on corporate takeovers or aggressive expansion, but on the simple, unshakable foundation of doing good work. It was a place of balance, of clarity, of peace. A place where my name was on the door, not because I'd bought it, but because I had built it. In my small office, on the wall behind my desk, I decided to hang 2 frames. In one, I placed a printed copy of the Articles of Organization for Ora Bean Artisans LLC, the simple legal document that had been my shield. In the other, I didn't frame my first dollar earned or a glowing press mention. I framed a screenshot of Marcus Thorne's LinkedIn profile as it appeared that day. Under his name, the simple, devastating words, "Open to new opportunities." It wasn't a trophy of his failure, it was a reminder of what happens when you underestimate the person who just makes the lattes. A reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the one with the most power. And that's my story. But as I sit here, in my own space, built with my own hands, I realize this story isn't just about coffee, it's about knowing your value, even when the world tells you that you have none. It's for every single one of you who has ever poured your heart, your soul, and your expertise into your work, only to have someone else try to devalue it, to commodify it, to slap a barcode on your passion. Your true worth isn't in your job title or the name of the company on your paycheck, it's in your skills. It's in the relationships you build based on trust and mutual respect. It's in the secret blends you create, the intellectual property that exists in your head and in your heart. That is the asset that no one can ever truly take from you. In the end, and I truly believe this, it wasn't about revenge. It was about building something that was so authentically mine that it couldn't be scaled, couldn't be replicated, and couldn't be taken away. It was about creating my own economy, based on my own worth. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It does more than just help the algorithm. It tells me that my story is being heard and that I'm not alone in this feeling. Share the story with anyone you know who needs a reminder of their own power. And of course, hit that subscribe button for more stories about owning your worth and turning the tables. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, what is your secret blend? What is the unique skill, the special knowledge, the thing that is so truly yours that no one can ever take from you? I can't wait to read them.